It starts with a simple question and ends in objective reality. Through our journey from there to here, we find one another and ourselves. And as the next 24 hours breaks free from our last, we gaze onward in reflection of the day.
Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.
Welcome to the Daily Wrap-Up.
Friday, November 14th, 2025. Thank you for joining me today. Well, it's one of those days, one of those weeks, months, years where, I want to come out and address the things that we were correct about, and that we're going to point at things as we always do about stuff that we've been, our track record of being consistently correct about pretty large. Not to pull my shoulder, pat myself on the back, but you go back to our track record, as I pointed out many times, myself, Whitney, Derek, the Daily Wrap-Up by itself, the TLAV team. I'm very, very, very proud of the consistent work we've done. As far back as you want to look, going back to the cannabis topic and how consistently correct I've been, even back when that was very contentious, or the conversation around, and not just this, our platform and everybody that writes here, and the COVID-19 conversation, or the war on terror, foreign policy in most cases in a general sense about where we were going, not knowing every single detail, but, how about East Palestine, Lahaina, any of these conversations. I think it's important to recognize the measured, objective, nonpartisan coverage, waiting for facts and giving you our best outlook on what we think is coming and how consistently that turns out to be the correct, where it ends up. Now, so today with, as we've already kind of been touching on, the Epstein topic, the two-party illusion, support for Donald Trump, I've never in my life seen this more vulnerable. And I just said that like a few weeks ago. And today, even more than I've ever seen in my entire career doing this, I've never seen more people, whether they even, as I see it, whether they even realize that what they're looking at or what they're uncomfortable about is the two-party illusion kind of all breaking down. Like, I think some people are calling some of these things out, but haven't contextualized what exactly it is that they're seeing, as opposed to just we're being lied to by the team. This is a much larger topic. The way that the left is responding to some of these cover-ups, these lies, almost in and of itself show you that there's more to the story than just one side fighting the other. Like that's the largest part of this Epstein point, is that right now you can clearly see both sides. As I see it, both sides are playing this game. I don't think either of them want it really to come out, save for maybe a few of them, and ultimately are able to play their selective releases and use it against each other in hopes that both of them sort of, come to an agreement to not allow any of it to come out under some different guise of change. I don't know. But the point is that we are watching this completely break down. And the Epstein conversation, as I said, is very much exposing not just the two-party illusion, but in particular, the people who have kind of tried to co-opt that awareness before we got here. What's fake patriots, the fake MAGA movement. And that's not necessarily only Republicans versus the other side. It's just the manipulators who are using the current momentum to try to change your opinion. If it was the Democrats in power, it would have been something else, but I argue with the same kind of outcome in mind. Well, we're going to talk about where that is today with the Epstein files. It's very, very revealing. It's interesting. And Donald Trump's administration is kind of spinning out right now. And we're going to go through the different, the emergency meetings and the kind of pressure against Congress, men and women in Congress, the massy element of it, what Johnson's currently doing and kind of where it stands right now. But I think it's pretty clear that this is not working in Trump's favor, as now, yet again, it's a hoax and more information. As Derek writes, and I'll show you in a minute, there's just no pretending, as he wrote, that there's no there, which I hate that. But it's a kind of a nod to political points from the past, but it's obvious there's something there. It's objectively clear. Even with his responses to things, it shows you that there's more to the story, but the facts themselves are pretty undeniable. And this is coming out with new emails, whether selectively shown or not, from Epstein, pointing out that Trump knew about the girls, or that he, we'll get into all of this. And it's very, very revealing, but I guess more so to people that really didn't want to see that it was there. And how that overlaps with Israel, and I think is a very important point as well, as usual. But we'll talk about the updates on the FBI investigation around the Halloween terror attack, and just kind of a general point about that seemingly anything, rather nothing going anywhere. Any of these stories, whether it's the Dallas shooting, I mean, what we keep seeing is a lot of hype and momentum and movement and documents being thrown around, and then there's just nothing happens. And I'm going to get back into this point yet again about what seems to be the one person. We'll get into the one individual in all this that has not been named, that was not held, who was released, no charges. Yeah, and this seems to be the one person who was involved with the largest actions, yet the other people are being charged. I feel like, just like with Dallas and other situations, just like the FBI always has, we're watching them sort of manufacture events with people they're either involved with or somebody else, maybe another foreign intelligence apparatus, is also involved with. Well, we'll talk about how that overlaps today with MAGA and a point about the coming control grid. And all of this in general today is, as you'll see, kind of overlapping with the illusion of the two-party paradigm, the awareness around the many different lies. One of the main things we're going to get into right out of the gate is something I found really important that is, again, sort of with that point I just made, calling out the contradictions, where people like will point to somebody saying, we got to stop BlackRock and all these people from stealing all the land inside this country. Sure, I agree. Except for the fact that BlackRock and Larry Fink are literally, holding hands with Trump's administration. But at the same time, as we'll talk about early, there's a major Israeli company pretending to be an American company that is scooping up real estate all over the country, but they don't care about that. Interesting to see where that goes. All coming together to show you the sort of technocratic future that they're driving you into. But I guess being double-crossed is the best way to frame it. From Donald Trump, from what he's currently doing to people he supports, and finally the awareness reaching people who are large enough to make it clear that nobody buys it anymore. His lies have been adding up to an extreme degree. And what we're really starting to see with all of that is the line where you have people, a huge apparatus of very influential people who are willing to lie about anything, even if it's in your face, even if it's obvious. Epstein who? And then literally everybody else. And there's, varying degrees of awareness within that. But I mean, you just don't look at this like a Stargate or anything else from day one and pretend that we all just don't see it. But let's start with a point about Kash Patel, the FBI, and Venezuela that I just wanted to include that I think is very interesting. Now, this is, again, from one of these many characters, Eric Dougherty, who will just come out and support and share and yell out, but whatever they point to. Now, this is kind of this clip itself is Kash clearly out of his depth, and that's just, you can see the way he's reading every other word. He's uncomfortable. I think this guy's in a very dangerous spot, knowing that he will be one of the earliest to be thrown under the bus should things go awry. I think we sense that. Him or Bondi seem to be the obvious ones. It's funny, statements like that always get the eye rolls from the adults, the insider big, people that look at us like we're smaller in the room, but ultimately those things end up happening and they later point to it. The point is that things like this happen every single day within politics. Yet when you discuss it before we get there, sort of somebody being surreptitiously manipulated, the CNN, Fox News types will look at that like that's just so conspiracy theory, which is people who've been following this show or any others have come to realize that those things are more often than not the way these things go. Not that we should assume that, but my point in this is that Kash Patel's, I get the sense he's aware that he's on the chopping block, let's put it that way. And what he's doing here is trying to back up Trump's initiative, except two things contradicting the Venezuela overlap with fentanyl, but also just insanely arguing that after apparently bombing a few boats in the ocean, which don't have any real connection to fentanyl in the real sense, and then some discussions with China, that he has shut down the pipeline of fentanyl in the world, or at least to the United States. Again, these are statements like Tom Homan saying 1,000% increase in attacks. It's not true. Flat, period. End of conversation. Look it up for yourself. I've already done a show on it. It's not true. The only thing that comes from is what they say. And even then, what they're pointing to are a bunch of random events of them engaging with protesters, and they're lying to you about winning a 7-0 Supreme Court ruling that Stephen Miller pointed out. Or Bondi is under heat right now for literally backdating content to make it look like she was ahead of something. And they're lying to you. In every which way, these people are trying to deceive you. Nothing new, by the way. But this is about them trying to state that we've somehow altered the entire war on drugs dynamic because of the things they said, which I don't even think are true. But we'll play this first. We'll talk about it.
At a level never seen before. While at Ministry of Public Security headquarters, I met with my counterpart at MPS, where the Chinese government agreed on a plan to stop fentanyl precursors.
Now, I just have to comment, how I make fun of the media You know, where they have that sort of like, you know, we're, you know, the kind of like the mantra Steve and I make fun of, where it's like the da-na-na-na-na, na-na-na-na, na-na-na-na. You know, like they always have that like training way they're supposed to deliver the words and has some kind of impact. I get the sense that that's what he's like. He's, you know, the way he's trying to deliver this is to make, instead of just reading it out and giving the details, it's like you're trying to make it. That's somebody who's insecure in his position. Completely my opinion, but also that he's reading back and forth every other word. It just seems like, you know, it's a small point. But I very much sense that, and you know, my senses have tend to be correct in the future. I guess we'll find out.
Chinese government agreed on a plan to stop fentanyl precursors. What does that mean? The People's Republic of China has fully designated and listed all 13 precursors utilized to make fentanyl. Furthermore, they have agreed to control 7 chemical subsidiaries that are also utilized to produce this lethal drug.
Good. The lethal drug that we are stopping. Yeah, okay, so China said things. Is that worthy of this massive declaration that you've ended the fentanyl distribution in the world, even though you just told us it was Venezuela? What? So we're trusting China's word on what they're going to do now? It's just a weird statement. You can come out and say that China agreed to these things. We'll have to hope that this comes to pass. Not, we did it, it's over, the war on drugs is finished. What is it? Mission accomplished banner behind him, just like George Bush. Like, it just feels pretty they're desperate for a win, is the point I'm getting to, quite obviously.
Effective immediately, essentially, President Trump
effective immediately, essentially,
has shut off the pipeline that creates fentanyl that kills tens of thousands of Americans.
The pipeline that kills tens of. I mean, I'm overdoing it, but am I crazy? It's just weird, right? Just tell us what's going on. He's trying to make it so important, but Donald Trump spoke to them and they said some things. You know, this is not really. I mean, do we really believe that China is going to stop doing whatever it wants to do? I mean, or alternatively, are we going to ignore that you guys keep telling us China's the biggest evil villain in the world when you want that to be the case? It just seems odd. And obviously, if you get my point, I don't think that it's actually what's going on.
Substances are now banned, and they will no longer be utilized by the Mexican drug trafficking organizations or any other GTOs around the world to make this drug.
Right, because the criminals are going to abide by your rulings. Right. No more will they be allowed to use this thing. That's like thinking that gun laws will somehow stop criminals from using guns.
This historic achievement has saved tens of thousands of lives.
Oh, the achievement that just happened that hasn't even come into effect yet. This achievement that we're announcing that isn't actually is now saved all these lives because of some. This is ridiculous to me. Anybody who's even remotely discerning is going to go, okay, well, you're obviously just blowing this out of proportion to make it seem like something's going on. And maybe over the next month, year, couple of years, maybe we'll see something change. But the way they're announcing this is pretty insulting.
This historic achievement would not have been possible without the tremendous team of President Trump, the Attorney General,
the team of President Trump,
Department of Justice, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and Ambassador Perdue in China.
Okay. Well, that's leading to another point, of course. The first and obvious one being that I think that's insanely embarrassing, the way that they're presenting this as if anything has actually happened other than just having a conversation with China, and not like there's been plenty of conversations that have been had with China that don't really end up being what they tell you, or that Trump says, blah, blah, blah. But as Reed Media points out, but I thought it was coming from Venezuela. As Eric writes, breaking an enormous victory, as always, right? You know, it's embarrassing that you're going to have a government entity come out and say, this just happened. And without even anything more than Kash Patel, who's been caught lying 55 times in the last 20 minutes, is going to come out and say, the thing we won because Kash said. Always people like this, you can't really take seriously. If they're not going to be discerning and question what's being delivered to them by the government, then why would you ever take them what they're saying at face value? Consider it like anybody else, but just recognize these people will be blindly taking whatever the government tells them when they feel that's on their side. And it just goes on to say, effective immediately. Look, just wow, this is massive. It can't be talked about enough. It's perfect. Perfect. Now, here's the funny part about this. President Trump has ordered action, and the Department of War is delivering. Today, I'm announcing Operation Southern Spear. Here, another war for the peace president. Nothing new there. Led by Joint Task Force Southern Spear and Southcom. This mission defends our homeland, removes narco-terrorists from the hemisphere, and secures our homeland from drugs that are killing our people. The Western Hemisphere is America's neighborhood, and we will protect it. Okay, so, the globalism mindset, which is what this would be, regardless of the game of pretending like they're doing it to make it only about America. Even if your argument is this is about protecting only America, if your mindset is we have to do around the world to do so, then you're a globalist, okay? The game, or like what Trump just said, or the rest of them, I have to look at it from a global perspective as the president. Well, yes, I don't agree with that. That's exactly the opposite of what this country was founded upon. But the point is, that's globalism in one part. The mindset that we need to have one global view of how the world should work, or one global enforcement, a global rule infrastructure, global government. This is quite literally what is continuing to grow. And as always, the people that were the most vocal about this over the years are now the ones doing anything but call this out. But overall, that's not the point here, just to highlight the fact that this is them building another war on drugs, war on terror mashed together. It's nothing new, guys. The same old thing. And here's he said the news saying, for decades, the globalists in Washington have led our country into one disastrous foreign war after another. See, some people have the integrity and the principles enough to be able to call this what it is. But Southern Spear. So one, that's more war. But of course, you can pretend that because Congress doesn't authorize it, therefore it's not a war, even though that makes it illegal in the first place. It's still war, and it's still not a peace president. But here's the craziest part of all of it. This was from 2 days ago. Quote, few people are able to achieve this kind of privilege. Drug smuggler, granted clemency by Trump, headed back to prison for allegedly attacking nurse with IV pole, assaulting live-in nanny. Okay, we're attacking war on drugs. We're pretending we're going after this. We're making deals with China, but then here's a drug smuggler. You can go free. It's just silly. The point, of course, if you get it, is that it's not ever really about the things they say it is. If you think they care about drugs, I don't think you're paying attention. It's about the things they can use. It's like pretending they cared about woke pronouns and blah, 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 as opposed to just using those terms and those ideas and the ideology to get its foot in the door around the world to places that were at that point. It's pretty obvious if you understand it. Now, overall, I think we all recognize this is happening. I just did a show recently, the USA Today article, a prominent conservative saying, I feel swindled. I might even have that, it's probably gone now, but I've got I had the few clips from Candace Owens. Again, it's not to say that I'm saying because Candace says it, therefore, we trust Candace. You shouldn't be trusting me, guys. You should be taking everything with a grain of salt and checking it for yourself. That way you don't have to trust Candace or Ryan. You can look to the source material and confirm the claims for yourself. I do have this right here. This is just to point out that Candace Owens, with one of the most, if not the most influential podcast in the world, is saying this, in case you didn't see this.
Done with Donald Trump, or could you see a way that you would end up perhaps voting for him? Oh, you can't run again, obviously, but would you support him publicly again?
So I want to be clear. I don't regret voting for Donald Trump above Kamala. I think he was the better candidate, certainly a better candidate above Joe Biden. But what I will say is that he's been a chronic disappointment. And I feel embarrassed that I told people to go vote for him because this wasn't going to happen and it is happening.
Yeah, so he lied, or he promised the world and couldn't deliver, however you want to read it. And I still find that such a cop-out to then argue that you still would have voted for, so the unknown, or just what you believe you know about Kamala, is somehow now worse than him completely. I mean, this is what's so funny about that. So we're to believe that Trump went back on his word, right? So the opposite of what was promised. And so the opposite of what was promised is still better than what Kamala was doing, which would have been what? A third direction that's not as bad, worse? It just doesn't make sense logically. The point is they have to go, I still don't want Kamala, and I still would have stood with Trump, but he's a liar, and he's working with Bill Gates and Black. Okay, so then they're all the same thing. Let's just get past this childish need to kind of, you could add one more thing. It's possible that she is doing that in order to keep momentum with the people that support her, even though in her mind she doesn't believe that. Who knows? At the end of the day, saying you'd still vote for him, even though you just outlined that he's lying about everything, is the peak of stupidity to me. And it shows the two-party illusion, as always. The idea that you get trapped in this binary way of thinking that there are only two choices, and that if it's one, this the other. That's just, even now with what we're seeing, blows my mind. But here's 5 times August. It is quite fascinating watching Trump throw his entire base under the bus over and over again like this. MAGA is more divided than ever now. again, I've been pointing these things out because I believe this was happening and gotten a lot of flack for it. And I think today at this point, it is becoming very obvious that it's always been this way. So I'm not doing this to go, I was right. That's certainly part of it, to acknowledge that we were correct, if you think that. But the main thing is for people to stand back and look. This whole time, at least I have felt that the conservative base was not on the same page, we were being lied to. And the Benny Johnsons and Nick Solters and Eric Doherty, they're out there screaming in unison that we're all winning and it's all the same. By the way, almost exactly what was happening during COVID-19 from the Democrats. So stand back and look at that picture and think now and learn for the next lie. That when this comes around, don't follow the screaming popular people on Twitter, or look at what they say, consider it, but don't blindly take at face value what the team is saying, and recognize that there's a massive amount of momentum that keeps people trapped in what I argue doesn't even represent even close to the majority of people today. That's the false two-party paradigm. And that's what we're seeing, balancing on a knife's edge right now on Trump's side of it. Yes, but the same thing from before. I just really think people need to absorb that. And as he's saying here, more divided than ever. And I believe it's been clearly that way since, Stargate forward for the most part. And I honestly, my bigger opinion is that the two-party illusion, people in general have been pulling away from this for multiple administrations. This is just now finally breaking through. Now it says, though the infighting seems intentional by design, I would agree with that in a lot of ways. Admittedly, the MAGA base was something that kept me naively optimistic for so long. See, because he has principles. Even to the point to where he's willing to say, which never happens on this platform, that I was mistaken. I was incorrect in this. And I've been mistaken plenty of times. And he goes on to say, the base was something that kept me optimistic. And he says, I thought that he had to deliver on his promises or his base would eat him up. You'd think so, wouldn't you? Now, I argue the base is and does do that. But the people that they only allow you to see screaming above it all with all their million followers will lie to you about it and pretend that's what the base thinks. It says, turns out he knew his base would eat itself up, so he just does whatever he wants. But this has been going on for a while now. Just ask the COVID backs injured. He left them completely high and dry. Amazing how we don't talk about that. Suffering, and still to this day brags about how great the thing was. Complete middle finger straight to the face. 100%. This is funny to me. So 5 times August has been saying this like I have for a while, but he's saying prediction, the next U.S. election will be the lowest voter turnout in modern history due to widespread recognition and acceptance of the uniparty, which is both the idea that there's only really one government lying to us using the parties, but also that we're the blind adherence to what Israel wants through them. And there's two things there, but it's one conversation for me. And 100%, I agree with this. And as you guys well know, I've been saying this, maybe not explicitly that the next turnout will be that low, but that's why people are flocking away from the two-party illusion. That's why only 40% even participate. And within that 40%, 60% of them are independent. It's such an obvious lie for such a long time. But I'm glad 5 times August with his reach can get this more notice. And what's funny is Orange Schroyer goes, great observation and prediction. Yeah. Oh, thank you, Owen. We've been saying it for a long time. Of course, elections are rigged and stacked with mail ballots and who knows what else. Yes, but I agree. My point is to highlight, regardless, that the sentiment has begun to go mainstream. So that's all because of you guys, whether or not they swing around and go, TLAV's been doing that for 15 years. It's good that people get it in the mindset because and get ready for the next minefield, the next QAnon Russiagate, the next thing they use to try to force you to logically decide to trust part of the power structure, right? That's what QAnon, Russiagate, that's what it was, right? Part of their insider team was actually the white hats fighting for you from within, right? It's both those things we're trying to do that. I'm telling you, whether it's Elon's America Party, there's going to be something that's used to try to make you go, okay, that's the good people, or those are the good people. They're the ones fighting from within. That's what this administration was supposed to be. That's what Elon Musk was supposed to represent. Those things fell on their face. Matt Morse, who has 36,000 followers, he says, I am one of the largest pro-Trump commentators in the nation. Now, I don't know if I agree, look, who knows? Maybe that's the case. I wasn't familiar with him before this, but it's what he says. And he says, I get tens of millions of views every single month talking about Trump's America First agenda. And right now, I'm absolutely effing beyond pissed off that tonight, as a justification for H-1B visas, and I think it was a couple different kinds, but that one was included, Trump said that Americans don't have talent. He did, guys. I'll play it for you right now. And I just think this is pretty unreal, as he says, because it is showing you I mean, like I wrote, I don't see how you don't take that as some way as disdain for the American people. Now, here's the interesting thing before we get into the next part, right? Think about this. Right now, Donald Trump is, I think, pretty frustrated. I think he's seeing that even the majority of his base is not blindly going along with what he says. And I think he's used to that, at least feeling that way. And I think either he is always been lied to, that everyone's been on his side, and now he's suddenly seeing that and doesn't know why it's not the way it was before, or he's always known and he's been lying, but now the lie's getting out. Like, however you look at it, my opinion is that he's really frustrated that he's not being able to walk out and what was the thing he said on First Avenue and shoot somebody and they still support me, the whole thing he did, or the snake poem. Now people are finally starting to go, maybe you are the snake, maybe I do see it. And I think that really bothers him. And so I get the sense that he is right beneath the surface, pretty unhappy, even disdainful about his own people. Because aren't they supposed to be the ones that back me no matter what? And now they're out there calling me Epstein, this and that. I think there's a level of hatred right there, frustration, just irritation. And so when you see this kind of thing, I think it's interesting. The idea that, where was that? With the wrong one? Oh, sorry, this one here about the H-1B overlap. That when he says something like this, that I think that it speaks to that there is a little bit of a frustration there. Like, no, there's not that talent here. I don't know. You could take it for yourself. I get the sense that there is a little bit of disdain for just general American people. And I think most elitists feel that way. But here's 5 times August. Oh, I'll read what he said next. This is what Trump said in this interview. This was very recent.
Never going to be a country like what we have right now.
And does that
the
mean
Republicans have to talk about it, Laura.
And does that mean the H-1B visa thing will not be a big priority for your administration? Because if you want to raise wages for American workers, you can't flood the country with tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of foreign workers.
Right. And which was the big thing from Elon and him and everybody else, despite them having a little bit of a nuanced argument. We can be honest about that. It wasn't just no or all, right? And I talked about it then. But this was more so a sentiment from his supporters, who largely were just like none of it, right? But then it came out, as I'll show you in a second, that Trump and Elon used it basically more than anybody. And so it's a little bit of a mixed bag, or like a lie. I would call it a misrepresentation about what they were focusing on. And so now that it's kind of we're moving to the next thing and it's something he needs to use, now it becomes, we need that. Well, isn't that exactly what was being argued in other circumstances, maybe even outside of H-1B? It just becomes whatever they want to politically drive in that moment. Now, because this is something I argue he wants to do, or now that it's being pointed to and he's going to do it anyway, the response is we need it. And not just that, even just that, I would argue would be enough to say, well, if you need that, then what you're saying is we don't have that here. He comes out and straight up says that.
H-1B visa thing will not be a big priority for your administration, because if you want to raise wages for American workers, you can't flood the country with tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of foreign workers.
You also do have to bring in talent. When
we have plenty of talented people here.
No, you don't.
We don't have talented people here?
No, you don't.
Wow. Okay. So, when I first saw that, I'm like, okay, is it edited? Like, no, that's just undeniable. Which I'm already seeing people try to, in real time reimagine that's not what he meant. And you're taken out of context. You tell me how that's taken out of context. She reiterates, there's not enough talent here. No. Play it again.
Tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of foreign workers.
You also do have to bring in talent. When
we have plenty of talented people here.
No, you don't.
We don't have talented people here?
No, you don't have certain talents, and people have to learn.
Okay. Well, she said we have plenty of talent here. No, you don't. We don't? No. That was exactly how that went. Then he says we have, or was it?
Talented people
you
here.
don't. No, you
No,
don't.
you
We don't have talented people here?
No, you don't have certain talents. And
You don't have certain talents. Okay. And you could try to argue, okay, well, he just meant that we don't have, there's specific things that we need to find. Okay, even that. So your argument is that there's certain talents that we need for where this country is going that we do not have in this country. Or at the very least, you want to find one better, that it's better somewhere else. I mean, maybe that's just the truth, by the way. You can decide for yourself. But what's interesting is how much that's frustrating people who have been told the exact opposite by him and all of his team. And the argument being that it should be America first over anything else. These things are completely contradictory to anybody who's honest about the basic principle of the point.
People have to learn. You can't take people off an unemployment line and say, I'm going to put you into a factory where we're going to make missiles, or I'm going to put...
Which is exactly what happened in World War II, by the way.
Did we ever do it before?
Well,
I'll
give you an example. In Georgia, they raided because they wanted illegal immigrants out. They had people from South Korea. that made
Hyundai.
batteries all their lives. You know, making batteries are very complicated. It's not an easy thing and very dangerous. A lot of explosions, a lot of problems. They had like 500 or 600 people, early stages, to make batteries and to teach people how to do it. Well, they wanted them to get out of the country. You're going to need that, Laura. I mean, I know you.
Okay. Yeah. So when you see an interest in these immigrants being here because of a need for your industries or your business, then it's okay, right? Who cares if they're breaking the law? Who cares if they're one of those evil, rapist, murdering, villainous immigrants that you old bastardize without ever knowing who you're pointing at? All the ones we abstractly point to are all like that, but all the ones that he doesn't, it's insulting to your intelligence. Are you vetting everyone? It's like the farm point he made from before. If it's a farm that needs these people, well, we'll make a deal with the farmer. So you somehow just know every illegal, if they're illegal immigrants, then how can you possibly know their background? It's insane and it's contradictory. The truth is he's simply saying that we will keep these people when we need them. Well, they're just as likely to be rapist, MS-13, or whatever possible broad overlap, since you're not vetting any of these things. And 90% of the people that you're pointing to, arresting, sending to El Salvador are not even close to the things you're claiming. So if we can't recognize by now that he played everyone, now, I shouldn't say it like that. Plenty of us saw it, including conservatives, but that he was attempting to play everyone. The idea simply being that we have to go after all of these evil villains and then didn't do that. And in fact, made deals with the worst of them, the MS-13 leaders, to make them to go back to work with El Salvador. I mean, it's all right there on the surface. So they didn't really care about going after the bad guys. They cared about using that to institute their control measures, to scoop up all of your data, to train their models on the AI, to Israel, Palantir, all of it. We have to be honest about that by now.
You and I disagree on this. You can't just say a country's coming in, going to invest $10 billion to build a plant, and going to take people off an unemployment line who haven't worked in 5 years.
Right.
Of course, obviously, because literally everybody who might work there, all of them come right off the unemployment line. No, there's going to be people in this country who do have expertise. And this is how business, now, look, just in a general sense, my mindset is I think that this should be the prerogative of the companies. If there's somebody from another country that has the legal reality to come here through a visa and wants to work, I don't understand why that's an issue for everybody. It should be, if we're genuinely talking about meritocracy, then how is that different? No, I'm sure there's always other factors to include, but the point is that that's neither of those things are what they really care about.
And they're going to start making missiles. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah, it really does. And the truth is, as 5 Times August points out, that's exactly what happened before. He says, well, he had zero experience housewives making aircrafts and tanks in World War II, and POTUS acts like we can't train Americans to make batteries, or that there's not Americans that currently know how to do that in this country. I simply said, am I missing something, or did this feel like Trump expressing disdain for the American people? Sure does to me. Trump says United States doesn't have people with certain talents to fill the jobs domestically. That's exactly what he said. I mean, that's even taking the more benign version of what he said, that they just don't have certain talents. And then people are acting like this is taken out of context. By the way, it's funny, just since I just looked at there, I don't know if whoever lives in Tennessee, we are being absolutely invaded by these Japanese beetles that they're like identical to ladybugs. It's just, for those in Tennessee, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. It's insane. Like, they just work their way in. I just saw one flying across the room. It's just wild. Anyway, then I need to tell you that, but I just think it's crazy how they're invasive, and it's all across the state. We were just driving around town and these just covered everywhere. Anyway, back to the point. Forbes, as Trump defends foreign workers, his company sought record numbers in 2025. This is not new. I mean, I think this article is from November 12th, but we talked about this back around the H-1B visa point. Him and Elon Musk, it's their. If you're insulted by the push, what they did first, then finding things out like this, then again, my opinion would be that you were going to side with them regardless. This is dishonesty, guys. That's period. And ruining people's lives based on claiming that that's what it was and really not even being about that, largely about Israel and foreign policy. I mean, you just have to recognize how deceitful that is. And on top of that, here is Noam coming back around and arguing this was always the plan, saying basically under Trump's administration, we've sped up our process and added integrity to the visa programs, the green cards, all of that. And also, more people are becoming naturalized. Oh, so you've sped up visas and green cards. I mean, how does that, I mean, is anybody going to act like that makes sense? The exact opposite when you guys go on Fox and talk about how immigration's been a standstill, not a single person's come through, and then except we otherwise have sped up our processes. I don't know which is true at this point. I mean, it's just insane the level of lies that will come out of people's mouths. And meanwhile, this is another important lie that overlaps with Israel that I think is, I mean, you know my opinion about what's going on in this administration. I mean, I'll even just grab just one of these articles. I've done many, or shows rather, I've done many of these, but this is just the one that I think the title encapsulates exactly what I think is happening. The new Trump administration and the technocratic Zionist coup of the United States. And it's not just about Trump or Republicans. If you haven't been watching this show, it's about the one government who is using that to keep us divided while selling out to the highest bidder. Which again is really not even that unique of a point today. Everyone seems to be able to call it out, yet it's still weirdly considered completely ridiculous in certain circles of like the highest conversation, even in mainstream alternative media. Highest not meaning most respectful or respectable or even most intelligent or honest, just, you know, the most reach. But here's DC Drano. He goes, here's an idea. How about instead of 50-year mortgages, we start, which is, you know, Trump's thing, which is ridiculous, by the way, as people pointed out, what's the difference between renting your entire life and a 50-year mortgage? Well, tons and tons and tons more money paid in interest. But the point is, how about instead of 50-year mortgages, we start banning Blackstone, BlackRock, China, and illegal aliens from buying single-family homes? Okay. I mean, the idea of illegal aliens buying single-family homes, I'm sure there's instances of that, but the idea that that's even, you know, these people are lost in some illusory idea of what's going on in the world, or really just whatever the narrative talking points are that day. Point in fact, we're talking about BlackRock, right? And I simply go, so you're finally calling out Trump, which I, you know, of course, no, there will never be engagement on these things as it gets suppressed into Bolivian. But the point is, BlackRock's Larry Fink abruptly becomes a part of Trump's inner circle. Right. Or BlackRock working with Elon Musk on XAI, BlackRock working with, I mean, Israel. I mean, it's only a problem apparently when it's anybody but Trump's team, but he's on the inner circle of Trump. So if you're going to start criticizing BlackRock, then you're calling out Donald Trump, but he won't make that connection. But that's not the point today. The point is, if we're going to start screaming about, right, and we should, by the way, BlackRock and what they're doing in the real estate field, I wonder if DC Drano was willing to call out another supposedly American company, even called American Landmark. Let's talk about that. Susan Abuhawa points out an article from The Nation. An investigative report by The Nation reveals an Israeli real estate company is one of the top companies buying up apartment buildings in the United States and mass evicting American tenants to hike up the rent. Now, I'm not trying to decouple this from BlackRock. I'm willing to bet you that BlackRock is very much a part of this because Israel is very much a part of this and Trump's administration is very much a part of it. Well, this is the point. It's one thing, and left, right, it's all coming together right now for control over your life. Whatever possible, she writes, or wherever possible, they are making ICE do their dirty work. See how this works? Pretending to be doing something else when it's really about what the real agenda has always been. The company, Elko, operates through a housing company called Electra. This company also operates in Jerusalem and the West Bank, where they use the Israeli military and settler groups to forcibly remove Palestinians from their homes, which are then handed over to imported Jews from New York and other places around the world. When we tell you they will eventually do what they do to us, we're not being hyperbolic. Think about this. Now, here's the article. One of Israel's biggest companies is taking over huge swaths of U.S. real estate, and tenants are paying the price, if they're allowed to stay. So, installed, Kelly says, the person, Darian Kelly, says that they installed a slew of gadgets, which I wasn't able to find out exactly what that was, but probably smart meters and stuff like that he says they didn't need before raising the rent nearly $400 a month. He could have told her about the eviction notices the company kept filing against him, the ones that came. He says with an onslaught of fees, the vet virtually guaranteed he'd never fully get back on his feet. Now, who's to say? Maybe this person is delinquent. Maybe the point is raising rent is not necessarily nefarious. People do it all the time. What I find interesting is that this seems to be a pattern. And you can, as always, please read the entire article to get the bigger picture. I'm just going to give you what I think is important here, which is an Israeli company that seems to be parading around as an American company, or rather a company that was American that was taken over by an Israeli platform, is essentially buying up real estate all over the country, instantaneously rising prices and boxing out most of the people that are there. And I think this is about, maybe not most in some cases, this to me feels like another larger element of what Israel seems to be doing to this country, take it for whatever you want. That's my opinion on it. You just understand that this company, which is acting against American interests while most Americans are struggling to own homes and rent and so on, are hurting, are putting Americans in positions of destitute. But then recognizing that when people call this stuff out, they're not talking about that, talking about BlackRock and so on, and only making it about certain things that they then somehow only make about Democrats. Same thing everywhere we look. Now it says, before they came, rent was manageable. I was never late. When they took over, it became out of reach. Same kind of point. But, the sentiment you get from the article is this seems to be sort of as I'll even read one of the statements, that is the plan. That's what they plan to do. But you could argue that's what the betterment of the platform or the building, right? You could always argue that's what the intention is. So my point is not so much about the rising of the rent, but who's doing this and what the outcome is. It says they that Kelly referred to is American Landmark. That's the name. A major corporate landlord with roughly 34,000 units concentrated in 111 mega complexes like Conrad across 8 southern states, particularly North Carolina, Florida, and Texas. Roughly 2/3 of its properties were purchased after the COVID pandemic began, right? See, there's overlaps here, and we all saw this. We all called that massive transfer out when they were scooping up homes. People made it about BlackRock, which I guarantee is overlapped here. It says, and the company with a private equity structure that allows investors from all over the world to bet on the growth of its real estate portfolio is now America's 34th largest landlord. Based on a review by The Nation and Type Investigations of thousands of eviction records from dozens of American Landmarks properties, as well as the interview with its CEO, Joseph Lubbock, it's clear that the company's management model inevitably leads to the frequent displacements of tenants like Kelly. At Conrad, the company is filing eviction notices at a rate 9 times the national average. That stands out. 9 times the national average. There are other buildings raising rent. Something's amiss here, as I'm sure you noticed. I wouldn't be talking about it otherwise. Housing experts told The Nation the Type Investigation. So there's The Nation and Type Investigations are the groups that were looking into this, that they housing experts told them that they can worsen a cycle of debt and have a disastrous effect on people's ability to rent a home in the future. Now, it says Joseph Lubbock, who's the CEO, confirmed that rent increases and displacement were actually part of that strategy. When we take over a property, he says we do analysis and how much rent is going to go up. We typically raise the rent between $100 to $400 and people are displaced. Now, that doesn't seem to be necessarily based on anything other than just what their plan is once they take over the companies or the buildings. And it says whether they stay or get priced out, these tenants are also linked to a multinational conglomerate that profits from the displacement of people on the other side of the world. So when you recognize that this company is investing and profiting from the displacement of Palestinians in the West Bank, then you start to see an overlap. You start to see an overlap to this company profiting from the displacement of Americans inside the country. Really uncomfortable to recognize that very same thing, isn't it? And maybe the same intention behind both. It says that's because American Landmark is almost entirely owned by a company called Elko, one of Israel's largest corporations. Of course, it's called, either it was, I think it was originally that, but of course they buy something called American Landmark and then turn it into something doing Israel's bidding. It's pretty perfect for how we've seen this operate. It says, for years, Elko, via its Electra Super brand, has done extensive business in Israeli settlements, illegal Israeli settlements in the occupied West Bank and East Jerusalem. Israeli settlements drive many thousands of Palestinians from their homes and are considered illegal under international law. Even that, what do you mean considered? They're illegal under international law. That's the reality. And, it's just funny how that statement still is watered down, even in this article. Elko has also maintained deep ties to the Israeli military, including during the genocide in Gaza. So a company that literally is working to this very moment with a government that's on the chopping block in the international community for committing a genocide and working with them to displace Palestinians from homes that they legally own. It says that year, this is 2016, they sold it all again, rebranding. This is just quickly jumping through. The point is in 2008, the Elko purchased 90% of Landmark Residential. By 2011, Landmark had bought $564 million worth of real estate in the United States. Let's see how long back this goes. In the following years, the company repeatedly acquired massive portfolios only to sell them off at a tidy profit and start again. Now, there's something there. Now, whether this is trading off with something like BlackRock or whether or not it's another Israeli company under the umbrella so it doesn't look like it's just Israel conducting, there's something here, guys. That doesn't even logically make sense for the company just to sell everything and start anew and continue to somehow stay profitable and control the market. In 2016, Lubbock and Elko had built the new $2 billion portfolio. Right. So 5 years later, after dumping everything, they somehow built it all back up again to $2 billion. Something is amiss, obviously. I think this is bigger than just buying up property. But so the point was that year they sold it all again, apparently, and rebranded as American Landmark, right? So Israel buys Landmark Residential and turns it into American Landmark. Can you factor it? Can you deduce why that might be? Well, why they would turn a company into something that outwardly facing sounds like a apple pie American company? You guys aren't stupid. You know exactly what's going on here. It's about trying to present that forward. Now it says, and I'm going to play that clip again in a second. It's just always important for people that haven't seen that. And it says that year they sold it, rebranding as American Landmark and snapping up thousands and thousands of units. Lubbock's higher-ups at Electra have touted the way their partnership with Lubbock has become an international money-making machine. Right, so in essence, you're watching them use this situation to extract wealth outside of the American industry, American economy. In 2016, with the creation of American Landmark, what we did was essentially transform Electra Real Estate, Lubbock says, from a traditional real estate company into a private equity firm. Right. So that makes it more overlap with BlackRock and the whole thing that we're talking about, the shadow bank that it is. Today, Lubbock serves as the CEO of American Landmark and the chairman of Electrica America, an Israeli company that he's the CEO of, under the ever-growing umbrella of Electra Real Estate, based in Israel. Meanwhile, Electra has landed contract after contract in the West Bank and expanded its ties to the Israeli military in the midst of an ongoing genocide that the whole world has documented. Electra has extensive links to the West Bank settlements. So right as we're doing this, as they're displacing Americans from their homes, even if it's just by increasing the rent, they're doing the exact same thing to people in Palestine, at West Bank, as well as Gaza. Furthermore, Electra is deeply intertwined with the Israeli military. Surprise, surprise. So you could also call this an intelligence operation. It owns Electra Power, which has been, quote, the exclusive gas supplier of the Israeli Defense Forces. So literally allowing the fuel that's being provided to continue the genocide. And the country's police and prison system services for many years. The prison systems that are raping and torturing people. It says, and supplies gas to illegal settlements, according to American Friends Service Committee, who Profits has found that Electra also helped to construct and maintain multiple Israeli military and police training facilities, which are in many cases training ICE and U.S. police to come back and enforce the goodness of the IDF on you. In 2024, well into the Gaza genocide, Electra Power's CEO said on an Elko earnings call that, quote, the IDF is a major client. Here's what he said. We stand shoulder to shoulder with them in facing challenges and fulfilling missions. We are likely the only supplier that can say we've expanded our areas of deployment. This is a great source of pride for us. Think about how unnerving that is. You're talking about the CEO of the central company that is largely owns 90% or more of the American Landmark company. And what they're saying is we expanded our areas of deployment while speaking of these companies and what they're doing in the United States. Deployment. God, it just never ceases to amaze me how seemingly blatant this is. American Landmark. Hundreds of millions of dollars are then funneled into the machine of Elko-owned Israeli corporations that are helping to wreak havoc on Palestinians. So as they extort more wealth from the U.S., they then use that to go hurt people in other parts of the world. Fantastic. This really does bother me in a lot of ways, right? That right now we have this effort by the Republicans, team sport Republicans, not all conservatives, to make you focus on problems, but in a selective way, sort of like the lesser of two evils in the left-right paradigm. It's how these governments operate. So instead of focusing on the real problem, or during the COVID-19 point, when it was still this company and it was about Biden and the whole, selling out to China. Well, it turns out that really wasn't the big picture. Surprise, surprise. So, an overlap point to Israel. Another lie in the same vein as people in the team sport politics side of this sell you on something else. Same exact kind of idea, right? Where they sell you on an idea that is the opposite of what's actually happening. So you buy the claim of what's happening and ignore what's actually going on, right? So in this case, what do we keep seeing from all these partisan media apparatus people? Well, they come out and say Netanyahu is going to decouple from the U.S. aid, which anybody with a brain is. I didn't even look into this. I said I highly doubt that's going to happen. Near impossible for how much they depend on that, right? But here's the quote. I'm actually going to play it. It's just he says, "We don't need U.S. soldiers. We're fine. We fight on our own battle." Not true. Flatly, completely false. But it's so basically they're coming out, not Sprinter Press necessarily, but this is the black MAGA preacher saying, "I'm 100% behind it. No more handouts. Israel's beast is on its own." Now, okay. Even most of MAGA, interestingly, weirdly, does see the Israeli problem, not Jewish, but Zionist Israel problem. And that is disputed by some of the very same people. The point, though, is that at the same time, support Trump in blindly supporting them. It doesn't make any sense. But what the point is this is him saying, we're going to phase out the aid. Now you've gotten all these team sport players out there going, see, Trump's going to save this and we're getting rid of Israel, save them for last, except that's not at all what's actually happening. Yesterday, Israel seeks a 20-year military aid deal with the United States. Every single time, guys. But if you don't look to antiwar.com with their sourced and excellent journalism and listen to Nick Sorter, then you're going to be misled. That's how that works. The point here is that this is the extension of what we've always been talking about, the Memorandum of Understanding, right? Which is $3.8 billion a year it ended up being about $40 billion. So they're going to reinitiate this. I will bet my life that Donald Trump will either give them the same thing or make it more. Watch. That's what I predict. Definitely could be wrong, as always. That's just my opinion. But watch as that happens, because they are not going to stop funding this, and Trump has done doubling down on everything pro-Israel. But here's the team out there lying to you about the opposite going on. We're going to decouple from... Remember when Alex Jones came out and said, Netanyahu and Trump are splitting ways? I told you, my sources are always right. And that didn't happen. And then no one called that out every single time. So as Candace writes, as we get into the Epstein point, they are blackmailing President Trump in broad daylight. The slow release of the emails is intentional. Now, that's her opinion. Interesting thought, though, isn't it? Now he will give them whatever they want. For those who struggle with context clues, they equals Israel, who Jeffrey Epstein worked for. This is how our nation is run. Interesting, right? Now, you may disagree with her point, but what I find really interesting, first of all, it's obviously possible, but blackmailing Donald Trump in broad daylight. Now, that would mean that Israel is driving him to go in their direction. Sort of like, excuse me, hiccups all of a sudden, Charlie Kirk, right? That was what he arguably, as Candace points out, was recognizing. Yeah, it was recognizing, in my opinion, that Zionism was the real issue. Because you could see, even up to that point, he was still supporting Israel. But you could see the issue with seeing Netanyahu trick Trump to bomb Iran, for example, and that he was unhappy about that. And the Zionist influence to force him to lie on and he called that out. Not about Israel, though, but about the Zionist, about the people who were trying to convince to lie about what's going on. And the funding, he refused, and all of this stuff, right? So the argument would be that Zionist infrastructure would be doing the same thing to Trump. And whether he knows it or not, or is able to stop it, that's the highlight, is that maybe he's going another way. And they had to drip these emails out to force him back into line, which would make a lot of sense. But the only way this makes sense, guys, is if you recognize that Israel is influencing, if not controlling, every element, the Democrats, the left, the right, all of it, the government. Because if you're seeing him by her, what she's insinuating is that the dripped emails that the Democrats were letting out, well, through the whole thing with Massey and the whole thing, but the point is he's calling it a Democrat hoax, is what they're letting out to force him back into position. Now, it's hard to say because I tend to see Trump as being very like a willing participant most of the time, but it's interesting. But the point to take away from it is the two-party illusion, guys. It's obvious to see that they will dictate and influence and bribe and sexually blackmail anybody in any position to get what they want. So it's not about left and right. It's about outside influence and our government selling us out right now. But she's simply pointing out that he's being blackmailed. So consider that as we go through this. Now, don't forget, just 2 points on Maxwell. We just talked about the insane point from November 10th that Maxwell is getting a puppy to play with in jail, according to the Daily Beast, as opposed on top of apparently getting cushy treatment, allowed to take, just basically treated like she runs the place. The warden essentially helping her put together documents for her case. It's unprecedented to me. And a puppy. But on top of that, here is a prison consultant revealing new details on Maxwell's stay, saying she's treated with a tremendous amount of deference. Also, as it seems to be coming to, this is just another, somebody claiming it's coming. I believe it is, though. Maxwell planning to file a habeas petition soon challenging her incarceration. Now, I get the sense it's not going to be a pardon because that would be too uncomfortable for Trump right now, but it will be something to that effect where he can act like it was something that was supposed to happen or the evidence cleared her or whatever it is. We'll have to see. But this is what most of us were predicting outside the partisanship, that this is where it was going. The idea that any Republican or conservative would be okay with pardoning Maxwell is beyond the pale right now. But here's the clip from the prison consultant and what he's seeing.
From inside Epstein accomplice Ghislaine Maxwell's prison camp. Federal prison consultant Sam Mangle, you know him. He's been on the show several times. He has clients serving time alongside Maxwell, so he hears firsthand what's happening there. He tells us that inmates are frustrated at the special treatment that they see her receiving. Customized meals, they say, access to exercise areas after hours, and a puppy to play with. Whistleblowers have been saying this. Now, inmates, according to Mangle, have gone directly to the warden, and they're getting the sense that Maxwell won't be there long. Sam Mangle is out front now. So, Sam, obviously the significance of that statement, could be everything, right? Because with what she is convicted of, she wouldn't be in this facility to begin with, right? She got moved there suddenly after a meeting with the Deputy Attorney General. So to be moved out of there might imply a commutation, which we know she wants from the president. Why do the inmates believe she won't be at the prison long?
Prison's a lousy place to be for anyone. You lose all of your freedom, your rights, everything. You really become a number. But the general sense that...
Isn't that a weird point, though? I got to come back to that. Why would you lose your rights? You know what I mean? Like in a real sense, a constitutional sense. Because you break the law does not therefore mean that you don't have rights anymore. They're still afforded a trial. They're still afforded, it's interesting. I have to come back to that. It's sort of like a fire in a theater thing. Like the reality would be that, sure, people should be held, you should have consequences for your, whatever. There's a nuance to everything, but they break the law. There's consequences, right? But the statement being that you don't have rights, I don't know. That's interesting to think about. I always just note those things where the government seems to carve out like an opening to because most people are going to go, well, they're criminals, right? So you're not going to want to defend a criminal, especially a really bad one. That's why Trump was going, the people bopping grandmas on the head, and then deporting a person with a traffic ticket. That's how they do that. Anyway, sorry to distract. Back to the point.
I'm getting from my clients and their families that are there is that typically they're treated with antipathy. That's how staff treats an inmate. But Ms. Maxwell is being treated with a tremendous amount of deference. And that is extremely unusual, if unheard of, within the Bureau of Prisons between inmate and staff. And one comment that was passed to me by the sister of my client was someone in the staff made a passing comment of, don't worry, you won't have to put up with this very long. I don't know in what context it.
So staff, and so that's secondhand though. This person could be lying about that. But I think it's already pretty clear with the puppy and the allowance of being there in the first place. You can't deny that this is over the top. Like this shouldn't even be happening in the first place. She's already gotten a proffer agreement. She's already been given what's the right word? Not pardon, but that effectively works. From whatever she said in that discussion that she's pardoned from, she can't be held accountable for, rather. Right? There's no way in which this makes sense to anybody. Now, again, to the point of them saying it, just because CNN points it out does not therefore make it false. It's obviously in their interest to point at this and make Trump look bad from a partisan left-right idea, but just because it's being said by them does not mean it's not true, as always. In fact, it's obviously clear this is happening. Somebody in this prison is not supposed to be there if they have a sexual predator background. They just ignored that. We know she met with Blanche. gave her all sorts of materials, asked her for specific information, gave her the proffer agreement, gave her a puppy, let her leave. And by the way, even that weird moment where they talked about the work release, that was real. Everyone pushed back. The reality of it, as we found out and we talked about on the show, she was given that work release. They turned her down on the job she wanted. Last I checked, I don't see any other one in its place, but the fact that you could have a sex trafficker be allowed to leave from a place she shouldn't even be in the first place for a job, this is so disgusting to me. Imagine if this was Biden, and that answers all your questions.
Was said, but obviously what is being discussed in the media lends itself to a certain assumption.
Yeah, well, it certainly does. And obviously we know, the reporting that she has been putting together a formal request for commutation. Now, just to point out, Maxwell was moved to this lower security prison without any explanation right after meeting with Trump's DOJ, right? So she gets moved. And, the treatment that she has received is so interesting. You say that usually inmates are treated with antipathy, and that in her case, the word to be used is deference. What more can you share about this deferential special treatment?
It could be something as small as when she first got there, while she's dressed the same way, gets the same food. However, it's being brought to her from the kitchen to where she's living, and typically inmates can't take food out of the kitchen. It's
like that alone. Again, it's him saying that, and he's getting it from people in there. So question it, but it does add up with what we're seeing. That she's brought her meals personally. It's pretty obvious that they've been given instruction to treat her differently. There's only one place that comes from, guys, and that's the current Trump administration.
Being brought to her. She got a new mattress when she came in. And trust me, as someone who went through that, a new mattress is a prized possession, in the BOP. She's given a lot of latitude for her outdoor rec time and her personal time. I know that she's not working at this point. She's not part of any social groups. The women tend to stay away from her.
Now, no, didn't say he doesn't have the ability to, just said at the moment, right? As I said, she that's crazy to me that she could potentially work off-site, which is just over the top, like everything else.
For a myriad of reasons. Also, from what's being reported, for her to have access to a computer or the warden, again, is unheard of.
Like
inmates and even attorneys during legal visits don't have access to the internet. They can bring computers in, but they're strictly to review files on a hard drive.
But she did. I mean, you get the point, guys. There's really no denying this. So whether or not she gets, as somebody wrote in the good word, clemency in the chat, or pardoned in general, or, whether that's where this goes, we'll have to see. It seems pretty obvious, though, that it would just be one more step in the direction of completely contradicting all the promises or what you claim you were going to do. Or as right now, the immigration focus has continued to take people away from investigating sex crimes and pedophilia and sex traffic rings, which is obviously the reality we talked about right in the beginning. That's exactly what happened. They shifted people from all sorts of things, largely were the very investigations that MAGA thought they were focusing on. Don't take that as left versus right. They're all the same thing in my mind. Now, here's another article. This one from OK. It's entitled Jeffrey Epstein's plot to let Donald Trump hang himself ahead of 2016 election exposed in shocking email. Now, these were all coming out, and I'll get to from where. This one simply says, Wolf, who described his relationship with Epstein as strictly professional, reportedly recorded more than 100 hours of conversations with the late pedophile between approximately 2014 and 2019. Now, this is funny. This right now, Megyn Kelly is getting all this heat for saying that something about whether Epstein was a pedophile or just a sex predator. And look, you hate on her all you want. She's dishonest and disgusting in many ways and a partisan for sure. But the point is still valid to point out that a pedophile is a very specific age bracket. He's a disgusting sex predator, and I wouldn't be surprised if he's a pedophile on top of all of it. But the argument was, this is what I said in the beginning, which I thought was interesting, that even the mainstream media shifted into calling him a pedophile when before they were desperately trying to hide all of that. And it turns out that what the evidence shows that he was just a sexual predator towards like 15, 16, 14-year-olds. And that's disgusting. It's absolutely abhorrent. So what people are doing is making it out to act like Megyn is somehow acting like it's okay. I highly doubt that's what she's doing, even though I find her disgusting. It's just interesting kind of overlap, right? Words do have definitions. So I thought it was also interesting that they kind of just waterfall went with that term, even though that's, it's because this is what the guidance was. It shows you that there's something guiding the hands of how this media apparatus works. But over on the top of it, you have the island and all the overlaps that you could argue clearly that that's what he was providing services for all sorts of pedophiles or whatever else he was doing, and then getting people on record, getting film, getting recordings. We can't hide from this anymore, or those that are trying to. We've always been talking about it. This is a sexual blackmail network that's run by intelligence. It's not a secret anymore. The point, though, all of it is that he arguably has information about Trump. And it says in a December 15th, 2015 email sent on the day of the CNN televised Republican primary debate, the author wrote to Epstein, quote, "I hear CNN planning to ask Trump tonight about his relationship with you, either on air or in scrum afterwards." Said, heads up. And he says, "I think you should let him hang himself. If he says he hasn't been on the plane or to the house, then that gives you a valuable PR and political currency." Wolf's 2015 email said, "You can hang him in a way that potentially generates a positive benefit for you, or if it really looks like he could win, you could save him generating a debt." So you could argue that doesn't necessarily prove that he did something wrong, more so that the insinuation could be used against him. That's always been one of the possibilities. Nonetheless, this is clearly damaging for Trump right now, showing you that there's much, much more going on here. Now, Epstein alleges Trump knew about the girls in one of these new emails released by House Democrats. Well, and it's not, as far as I can tell, it's not just House Democrats. This is where we overlap with what's going on with Massey and everything, but more emails. Yes, do they have an interest in making this about Trump? Of course they do. Doesn't mean it's false, though. And quite clearly, guys, historically, well, before we got here, this was clear that Trump overlapped with him in a lot of different ways. Knew about the girls doesn't necessarily mean that he broke the law, right? Other than not telling anybody that he was raping women, right? This is obviously bad for Trump, and his only response has been that it's not real. Trump administration holds Situation Room meeting over House effort to force release of all the files. And as many people pointed out, this was the day before yesterday, that, you don't have a Situation Room meeting about something that's not a big deal. And brought in Boebert and all the rest and ultimately tried to pressure people. Boebert, it seems in particular, even though she says otherwise now, the story seems to be pretty clear that there was an effort to try to get that to go a different direction. As you've probably seen, as yesterday, that this did get voted on and the information is coming out. Trump sought to get Boebert to drop her name from the Epstein discharge petition. Now, the reason, as you know, since you watched this show and plenty of others, is because of the Democrat who was about to be sworn in that Johnson wasn't allowing sworn in. She was allowed to be sworn in. So now there's a moment where this could happen. So it seems they did their best to try to get, as I was telling you, right? They were trying to find one Republican to take their name off the list. I said that a month ago. And so clearly that's what they were trying to do. This seemed like a last-ditch effort. She didn't appear to do it. I think this is the whole opportunism playing its, coming to pass here. Here's a clip from yesterday. Epstein files vote forced.
37 developing this morning, movement in the fight over whether to release the Epstein files. Yesterday, House Speaker Mike Johnson swore in newly elected Democratic Representative Adelita Grijalva of Arizona. Now, she was the final signature needed on a bipartisan discharge petition, which allowed lawmakers to bypass Johnson and force a vote to release files tied to the late sex offender. Now, Grijalva signed the petition shortly after being sworn in, and 217 other lawmakers signed that petition, including Colorado Congresswoman Lauren Boebert. A source tells MSNBC that Boebert was not persuaded to remove her name, despite several efforts made by the administration, including a phone call from the president himself earlier this week. Now, White House Press Secretary Carolyn Leavitt acknowledged the meeting, but said that she will not detail any conversations that took place in the Situation Room. Speaker Johnson says that he intends to put the Epstein resolution on the House floor for a vote next week, but it's unlikely to be signed into law due to an uphill battle in the Senate. This all comes after the House Oversight Committee released 20,000 documents from Jeffrey Epstein's estate. The emails put new scrutiny on President Trump's past relationship with the convicted sex offender.
Now, see, all of this is coming from the same momentum, right? So you have Massey trying to get more momentum through Congress, but you have the Oversight Committee releasing, of course, you could argue that them releasing something could be cherry picked. Of course you could. Just like you could have said that what Trump did with his ridiculous phase 1 release was absolutely cherry picked and edited and covered up. This is what they're doing. And this is why I think it's very obvious that it's a game being played when both sides have something to lose. And so it's a game of chicken, essentially, right? And the easiest way to solve that problem, release it all. And they're not going to do that.
In a 2011 email, Epstein told his co-conspirator, Ghislaine Maxwell, that President Trump had never been mentioned by accusers. But another email from 2019 claims that Trump knew about Epstein's activities. The emails also contained the name of one of Epstein's most outspoken victims. That's Virginia Giuffre.
Now think about this, guys. This is pretty obvious to deduce. Okay, for one, you're not stupid, and you can see with your own eyes the 50. However, I think there's like 14 picture, or no, maybe a bunch of pictures with Trump and Epstein, a lot in different places over many spans of a span of time. You have him in regard to Mar-a-Lago, even though he famously kicked him out. You have all these overlaps over the years. Epstein on record saying he was closest friend for 10 years. It's all there. It's really silly to pretend like you don't know that there's a relationship, right? But then you have the email that says he wasn't involved with anything. Okay, that's the one anomaly. Now you've got more emails that say that he did. So at the end of the day, you've got the one thing that seems to be an effort to hide that he's involved and everything else showing you that he's involved. Now, that doesn't mean breaking the law. Let's just be objective about it. I argue it's probably the case. But the reality is, at the very least, we know he was aware, involved, I would argue it's aware, but as I think, again, the emails now say he was aware of the girls or whatever. But let's just say he was present, right? He was there, and I think it's really easy to see that everyone could have noticed what was going on. But whether he broke the law or not, you can still decide, you can still dispute that. Clearly, it's in his interest to cover it all up anyway, because it will be used against him regardless. But that's a lie, no matter how you spin it.
Who died by suicide earlier this year. Her brother and sister-in-law, they live in Colorado Springs, and they've been pushing Congressman Jeff Crank to support the release of all the Epstein documents. Back in September, Sky Roberts and his wife Amanda, they stood outside Crank's office advocating for the bill.
Congressman Crank, I ask you, do you believe that sexually abusing minors and young women is above the law? You could do this today. Sign the Epstein Files Transparency Act and vote yes on the survivor-supported bill.
Our Brett Forrest spoke with Representative Crank last month and asked him about the Epstein files and petition. Crank tells us that he never signs discharge petitions because they, quote, hand control of Congress over to the minority party. Now, Brett went on to ask him this.
Do you want the Epstein files released?
Not only do I want them released, I wanted them released when Joe Biden had control of them.
They all say this. Johnson says this. Trump. They all pretend that. But but then go, oh, but we can't hand over power to the minority party. Oh, okay. So politics are more important than sex trafficking victims. Thank you. Obviously, that's what they're telling you. My political dynamic is more important than doing the right thing.
Which I strangely noticed that many of these groups that are out there calling for the release of the Epstein files were very, very quiet when Joe Biden had control of the Epstein files. It was only when Donald Trump got there.
Back and forth, and it's the same thing. None of them want this released if you start to pay attention, right? Or at the very least, over periods of time, they all have a point at which they try to stop it, which I think speaks to the same thing. Here is an article. Trump reacts to newly surfaced Epstein emails mentioning him, and what do you think he called it? A hoax. Only a stupid Republican would fall into that trap. That's lazy arguments right there. What he's trying to do is go, if you fall for this, you're not really a Republican. The only thing that works on are desperately blind followers who will lurch at any chance to be like, I'm on your side. People who have integrity and principles are going to laugh at that. But that's the best you're going to get. Even though you can prove that this is all true information. But it's a hoax. His argument's probably that they're using these to claim he broke the law, and that's the hoax, or maybe he's not even getting into that. It's all a hoax, apparently. But you promised everything, right? We're all going to phase 1 files, but it's a hoax. Well, White House slams Democrats' bad faith Epstein doc release as demand for files intensifies. Republicans call document release cherry-picked. Okay, probably. Does that mean they're false? You can't. This is how they're playing this game. You keep making the statement that they're manipulating it. Well, that with the truth is probably the point here. Ultimately, what they're trying to say is that they're manipulating it, but then letting you assume that means it's all false, and letting the Benny Johnsons of the world make that case without that being the statement. When in reality, you can easily prove that Trump very well had an overlapping relationship with him, very much. His best friend for 10 years, according to Epstein, and all the many different things. And they're just trying to hide this behind bad faith. Democrats bad. If you buy this, you're not a Republican. That's how dumb that they think we are. New York Times, House Democrats release emails, which we just discussed. saying that Donald Trump knew of the convicted sex offender's conduct and spent many hours at the house. We already know this in regard to spending at the house. Ro Khanna says the only reason these emails are out is that Lawrence O'Donnell had the survivors' lawyers on who gave me the tip to subpoena the estate. Think about this. So, I mean, look, I'm not arguing that any of them are on your side. The interest is clear from a political standpoint, but we shouldn't assume that they're all guilty either. We should be objective and wait, whether Trump or Biden or anybody. In this case, though, what he's saying is that, so right now you got the Republicans desperately trying to keep this from coming out. I think that's pretty obvious. And you could argue Democrats feigning interest, but maybe not doing much more. But then you have somebody in the media bring on Ro Khanna as well as the lawyers of the survivors, the ones out there going, we know it's all there. We don't care about our names. Put it all out there. And then Trump and them going, we care about the victims. Well, they're the ones telling you to put it out. Right. So it's just a disgusting game. You're using them to cover up the crimes that were committed. They were violated with those crimes. And gave him the insight to subpoena this certain thing. He did so and got access to all this information, which means that they've always had this information, which means the Department of Justice and, FBI, whatever else, that they knew this was all there. And then FBI, like Kash Patel, lied to you in front of Congress because here are the files. They got it after getting the subpoena. It says, why did Justice or the FBI not get or release these? You just can't hide from this anymore. This has fallen apart in front of them. And most conservatives are now calling it out too. New York Times, if you want to read the entire thing, Epstein alleged in emails that Trump knew of his conduct. I don't trust blindly any of these platforms, but the fact is you can prove that these things are real. Here is Newsweek. Donald Trump impeachment chances surge amid Epstein revelations. Now, my general opinion is that we need somebody to be impeached. I mean that in a functional sense. If we, I'd like to build toward a world with no government at all. But if we're forced to live within this state of society, the only way you can even maintain the illusion of our check and balance system is for Congress to do anything. Should have impeached Biden, should have impeached Obama, Bush, and all the rest, in my opinion. And that's not even an opinion. They're all war criminals. You can literally prove that they all committed crimes that were worthy of impeachment. Got to start somewhere. My point is that Trump right now is breaking the law just like all the rest of them. If you want to retroactively deem them all impeached, good, go for it. I don't care. To somehow make it all equal for your partisan mind. Trump in this place, in this moment, needs to be held accountable. Hopefully so the next president doesn't feel, as the Democrat, that they could do whatever they want to. So this is simply pointing out that now this is all falling at their feet. It's starting to get a little momentum. And I'm glad to see that. I'm sure people will take that as an anti-Trump thing. It's not. It's a wanting accountability in our government again thing. The chances that President Donald Trump will be impeached have surged, according to Polymarket, that's, in my opinion, more reliable than the polls they show you, but even still then is manipulatable, after the publication of more files from the Epstein files had come out. On Wednesday, lawmakers released more than 20,000 pages. Now, I haven't looked through all of it. I'm sure there are people out there diving through it. I'll probably be covering some of the important parts that are coming. Following this release, according to online gambling website Polymarket, a platform where users can place bets on the likelihood of world events. The chances that Trump will be impeached by the end of 2026 increased from 5% on Wednesday to 15%. So all that really shows you is that average people betting on this feel 10% more in the direction that it's going to happen. That's a pretty big jump. So polls can easily be manipulated. People tend to bet on what they think they want to win. So I think that's a pretty reliable thing to look at. It's not absolute, right? Because it's only people that choose to bet on it. Maybe people that bet have a different political side. I mean, who knows? But at the end of the day, I just find that relevant. And that what we're seeing is inching towards like a release valve. I doubt it'll be Trump, but if it comes down to it and he is very much exposed, throwing Trump out of the way with Vance in place seems to fit every agenda. Says these emails prove literally nothing. Democrats on the mainstream media are desperately trying to use this hoax, otherwise known as provable information, a distraction to talk about anything other than Democrats getting utterly defeated by Trump in the shutdown fight. What's so funny is they built this entire thing around the shutdown when we're so tired of this fake shutdown thing they do every single time. And so he's trying to go, look at how well I beat them in the shutdown thing. And we're like, I don't even think most conservatives cared that much about it other than team sport politics. Like it's embarrassing for him to say this very important thing that everyone cares about is fake and hoax. And they were distracting from my win against the shutdown, which ultimately was compromising on both sides to allow the government not to be. I mean, it's just pretty sad. That's a very, very lazy argument. Here's what Trump had to say. This is from, I believe, today. Yeah, today. Now that the Democrats are using the Epstein hoax involving Democrats, not Republicans. See, that's what I feel like he's trying to get at. That like somehow, just because they're only giving you part of the picture, that's a hoax. But that's not the definition of the word hoax, Trump. You're implying that everything they're showing you is false, and that is false. That's just not true. But he goes, using that, again, involving Democrats, but not Republicans, to try and deflect from their disastrous shutdown. It's like their shutdown again. That's just silly. Both sides have to play a part in allowing that to continue. And then they both ultimately slightly compromise to make it what happens every single time. And it says, and all of their own failures, I will be asking AG Pam Bondi and the Department of Justice, together with our great patriots at the FBI, to investigate Jeffrey Epstein's involvement and relationship with the government, with just with Bill Clinton, Larry Summers, Reid Hoffman, JP Morgan, Chase, and many other people and institutions to determine what's going on with them and him. Right. Okay. So he's going to investigate the Democrats. That's actually what he came out and said. That's what we are going to investigate Democrat connections to Epstein. I mean, this is what I'm talking about. This is the game of back and forth. Then none of them have the interest of wanting to show you all of it. And it says they determine what's going on with them. He says this is another Russia scam with all arrows pointing to Democrats. Except all the arrows pointing at you. Records show that these men and many others spent large portions of their life with Epstein and on this island. Well, first of all, you were a Democrat before you got to this place. So it's just a funny thing that they're doing. But it's, this is, I mean, I don't even need to explain these statements with what's happening or why Republicans are going, I just can't keep pretending anymore. But here's Caroline Leavitt coming out to lie to you. If not for the Jeffrey Epstein story, CNN would be forced to talk about how Chuck Schumer and the Democrats got shellacked by President Trump and the government shutdown fight. I mean, it's just sad. What are we talking about? So the fact that you guys argued to reopen the government around one issue, around funding, okay, good. So you stopped them from that thing. Is that really, that's the biggest story? And that's not even really what happened. That was a lie to begin with, and they both played into it. But he won the shutdown fight, and now government's back to control your life. We win. Now it says, it's not like that ever stopped, by the way, but it said it's clear that this is another Democrat mainstream media hoax. Just parroting what she's told. That's their job. Fueled by fake outrage to distract from the president's wins. Republicans, don't be fooled. Too late. No, I shouldn't even say it like that since it's not being fooled, but she's trying to say don't go in that direction. President Trump will remain focused on making America affordable again. Ma. M-A-A-A-Ma. Let's make America affordable again. That's not what's happening. In fact, it's the exact opposite. Grocery prices are up. Rent is up. Everything's up. Oh, thanks, American Landmark. All of it's going in the wrong direction. And everybody who's honest can point that out. That's it. The game of saying your grocery prices are down, it's just not true. You can ask Rock. You can look it up in the consensus. They're lying to you. They know that. They don't care. But here's Benny Johnson to cement the lie. New President Trump says Democrats need to start asking Bill Clinton, Reid Hoffman, and Larry Summers about Epstein. Cool. Breaking news. Deflection. That's what they do, right? Whatever the thing was today, I support the current thing. That should be their tagline. Derek Prose says, I've been reporting on Epstein since 2016. Went to his house in 2018 to film a scene for my documentary, Bringing Down Jeffrey Epstein. I've never claimed there was solid evidence proving Trump was involved in anything illegal. Same thing I've been saying. You can prove that there's very clear connections, but I've never seen the actual provable evidence that he broke the law. It says, however, for MAGA to act as if there's no there is just ridiculous. As we all know, Epstein and Trump were buds for decades. And again, I've got the clip right down below from Daily Beast podcast where he said we were closest friends for 10 years. And it says, photographed, videotaped together. Trump knew Epstein like young girls. Epstein had 16 of Trump's numbers in his black book, and they continued communicating even after the alleged breakup. MAGA loves to use my interview with Brad Edwards as if it exonerates Trump from any and all wrongdoing. But as I've said hundreds of times, Edwards specifically said Trump picked up the phone and told him info. He didn't testify under oath or in deposition. In fact, in Edwards' book, he explicitly says that what Trump shared was basically rumors and that their relationship, Epstein and Trump, was a lot closer than he originally thought. It's unfortunate that this issue, like every other issue in the U.S., has become partisan. Some of us care about exposing everyone involved, whether their names are Clinton, Trump, or otherwise. Exactly. Any links down below if you want to check it out. Now, Whitney came out today or yesterday, excuse me, and said, my feeling is that now it is safe, in quotes, to release the info that Epstein was really a sex trafficker as a side gig and was mainly an intelligence asset of Israel and the United States, a big-time financial criminal on behalf of transnational capital. She says, I would argue transnational organized crime disguised as transnational capital and an arms trader, Epstein, because the people he was helping have stolen so much of America's wealth and have taken control over so much of the government. Exactly. This is why even admitting the truth, the true breadth of the scandal and operation doesn't even seem to move the needle. And that goes for damn near every other topic that's partisan connected right now. Criminals are in charge and they run both parties. They have created the infrastructure for neo-feudalism enforced by technology and are herding us into the corral. I'll grab this before I forget. It's exactly my point on this. It says, opt out of AI, digital ID, and the surveillance state that Epstein Associates built now because we still can. We'll end with that point in a second. This is my show I did around this. Pronomos Capital, that's the teal overlap with the funding of the Freedom Cities in Gaza and, Prosperos. And it says, the Pronomos Capital and the rapid transition to a techno-feudal state. So where this is going. But she continues by saying, also, all of the people who smeared me this and last year for pointing out J.D. Vance's Peter Thiel connections and why Thiel is bad, and like Alex Jones, for example, also shame me for not trusting in Trump also shaming me for not trusting in Trump should be eating their shirts right now. But of course they're not after these recent releases. You sold the American people Epstein Associates as political saviors, and you should apologize. They won't. As Derek says to her comment, Whitney's right. So many people called her, me, TLAV, and our IMA colleagues blackpilled around the election for pointing out the obvious about Trump. Now, by the way, most of them are now the ones starting to call this out like they're the ones breaking the story. That's typically how this goes. Recognize that many of them are probably not honestly trying to cover it. Just opportunism. Pointed out, like I say, it's accurate, but recognize that people use the awareness well past the point, like David Icke's calling out Tucker about geoengineering and whatever else, to gain your following for next manipulations. I'm not going to say I know for sure. I think Dane being on Tucker's show is important. I'm glad to see him there. I think he's got some powerful information, but it's just interesting to see how these things come about. On the note of J.D. Vance, here at Decentered News did a little breakdown of this. Here's a short primer on J.D. Vance's connections to Epstein, which Whitney Webb was way ahead of the curve on.
Months ago, former President Donald Trump revealing his pick for vice president. Senator J.D. Vance, now his running mate.
J.D. Vance was elected to the Senate in 2022 and went from being a staunch critic of former President Trump to one of his strongest allies to now his vice presidential nominee.
Who is this guy?
I'm actually going to pause it there just because I'm realizing I've only got 30 minutes before I have an interview that's coming up. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap up a couple endpoints here. Well, 2 points I want to conclude before we continue or wrap up in about 30 minutes. Last on JD Vance. JD Vance tweet about Jeffrey Epstein scandal resurfaces 4 years later. And boy, it's awkward, right? All these things, as usual, as somebody kindly points out in the chat, right? All the things that we've been talking about for quite a long time, right? The story for a lot of these things is not necessarily that we're breaking the story, because that's not the case. These things have been around, that we were talking about these things years ago, or in Whitney's case, what JD Vance was and is well before we got here. But this is important simply to point out that they're willing to tell you whatever they want you to see. I think that this is him simply commenting on the in 2021 about an article called "The Jeffrey Epstein Case is Why People Believe in Pizzagate," and he says, "I think about this Matthew Walter column about once a month, essentially insinuating that Epstein and Pizzagate and it's all fake news and everyone's considering conspiracy theories, right?" Then he says, "Remember when we learned that our wealthiest and most powerful people were connected to a guy who ran a literal child sex trafficking ring, and then that guy died mysteriously in jail, and now we just don't talk about it?" 2021, right? Then he comes out and says, "What possible interest would the U.S. government have in keeping Epstein's clients secret?" And we've talked about these already. The point is just that now it's actually like you're getting mainstream momentum to call out something that they usually don't. Look, he said this, and now he's saying this today. They're lying to you. It's not, they all lie to you. But think about how this is breaking down in front of the people who never see this kind of stuff. Massey says, in spite of the last-ditch effort by the president to foil the motion and Johnson's propaganda, the discharge petition that he's been leading just succeeded. In December, the entire House of Representatives will vote on releasing it. Now, had they not just paused everything for a month, we would have had this earlier. And still, who knows what's going to happen between then and now. But they've released some through the oversight, but here we have the discharge for everything, I would argue, for what they're able to, that's not going to break. Well, see, as always, even if we get this, they'll still probably find reasons to hide certain information under the guise of national security. This person says, community notes from the top rope. This person says, fire this guy about Massey. And the Twitter fact check says, missing important context. Kurt previously advocated for the release of the files. See, I just love that. So people who were out there going, release the files, are now the ones getting called out for not saying that anymore, and now calling for Massey to be fired, even though he wants the files released like they originally called for. Just Massey laughs at it. It's just interesting where we are, right? People are showing you who they really are. Just like COVID, don't forget. Massey says, after months of fighting and the disparaging Epstein legislation, now that his discharge petition has succeeded, Johnson says he tried to pass the law by unanimous consent. He goes, but if that's so, he should have no problem voting yay next week. Listen to his own words. I'm going to skip it for time, but the point is he's out there saying, of course I would have done it. Well, we're going to find out when he votes yes or no. We all know where he's actually at. Robert Barnes and plenty of others, I would argue, were some of the ones that were sort of corralling people to support Trump before the position, and now are the ones saying they're all lying to you. I'm glad to see that. People can change their mind, but I just think it's interesting to recognize how many people are out there, kind of, whether it's good intention or not, corralling people into the left-right paradigm. And now when it's, easy to see it, people are calling out the lie. It's about being honest about this before it's easy. Dan Bongino says, Congressman Massey, when Director Patel and I entered our leadership positions in the FBI, we had our hands full, but we were happy to be part of the president's team, and we still are. Despite the multitude of challenges we faced, one of our first initiatives was to aggressively pursue a new strategy to investigate January 6th pipe bomb terror attack. We brought in new personnel. The bottom line is he just goes on to make a big case about how, yes, our leadership team will be meeting with the FBI. It's about the case that they seem to be not commenting on. And what he's trying to simply say is like, look, I called you twice. This is Massey saying I received troubling letter from the attorney general, from the attorney representing the most recent FBI whistleblower regarding the January 6th pipe bomb investigation. Just a reminder to Kash Patel, in case this letter is warranted, federal law prevents retaliation against whistleblowers. All of this is coming out. We talked about this in a recent show, which I think is right here. January 6th pipe bomber. The point is that they're addressing it. They're pointing to it. But the reality is nobody believes them, not even a huge supporter of Trump. He says, Barnes, they don't realize no one trusts them anymore. That's what the disastrous handling of Epstein in 9 months of no results gets you. Well, it's not just that. It's that they're liars and they're constantly caught for lying, right? The point is that Dan's just trying to make it seem like we're doing everything, but they're not, though. And nope, not even their supporters believe them, which was the point here. You can read through what he said. It's basically just saying that we're working on this and we're getting to that, but this is the first time they barely even commented on this. We'll come back to that point in a second. Caitlin Johnstone points out one of the craziest things happening right now is how there's been report after report after report showing that Epstein really was an Israeli intelligence operative. You know, like anybody in the know of the conversation was telling you from a long time ago, whether it was because of Acosta or Whitney's books and the overlap, it's pretty obvious. And it says, based on publicly available documents, and yet it has no measurable impact on mainstream media or politics, like everything else, guys. And here's many of the articles from Dropsite News. There's others, Dropsite News. I think there's been many reports that have come out. She's just highlighting Dropsite's work, which has been excellent. Jeffrey Epstein helped broker Israeli security agreements with Mongolia, in Syria, it's all over the place. And this is Caitlin again. When you realize what a large-scale power broker Epstein was for Israeli intelligence, you understand why it's entirely reasonable to suspect that extensive state resources would be put toward an elaborate plot to murder him in his prison cell and make it look like a suicide. And this is Democracy Now! Just reporting from Dropsite News about the work and simply highlighting it's a 10-minute clip. It's worth watching. But just recognize that the world knows, guys. The world knows Israel's involved. The world knows Israel basically controls Trump's administration and all of the U.S. government. So it's not confusing to wonder why it's going the way that it is right now. Now, to go through this pretty quick, Trump sends a letter to President Herzog of Israel, formally asking him to pardon Netanyahu. He's doing that right now, calling it a political, unjustified prosecution of a man committing genocide. Like, they are locked in. Guys, with everything people see, this is what he's doing. Even Clint Russell comes out and says, Trump is going to lose House and get impeached in 2027, and I'm not going to lift a finger to defend him. Still trapped in that two-party paradigm. You did nothing you promised you did, and yep, I know. That's what we were trying to tell you beforehand. We were trying to get you all to see that he was lying to you, because you could, just like David Icke says, it wasn't that you now see it. You could have seen it back then. It was obvious back then. For whatever reason, many people chose to blind themselves to what was easily seen before the selection. Not to say that we should have voted for Kamala. The point is they're all lying to you. But recognize that this is where it's still going. This is where it's going, where it is now, where it's going, whether Democrat or Republican in the next position. But Trump is tripling down. Well, you get people like this, the massive team support, sport politics supporters out there. Real MAGA held the line. Right. So in your mind, real MAGA are people that are blindly following Trump, regardless of whether he's a criminal. This is the line now. People that are blind followers and people that have integrity, or just not willing to blindly follow people who are being dishonest. DC Drano says, as of today, who are our top 3 MAGA congressmen? And then gets an answer that he tries to ignore, which I find hilarious. But somebody goes, well, you didn't like the answer? Grok reiterates it. And it's some weird thing. Cut to the chase. It was acting funny about his ID or something. It basically said Thomas Massey, Marjorie Taylor Greene, and Tim Burchett. Okay. Well, that's not what he wants anybody to see, because the whole point of him asking this was meant to be the top 3 MAGA people are the ones that are bucking the supposedly mainstream MAGA situation, because MAGA means making America great again. Even Grok could point that out, but all these team sport politics people are trying to hide from that reality. And I simply said, oops, post it down there. This person says, as this plays out and Trump ends up demolishing the deep state once and for all, some of you are going to feel like a fool for having decided the best course of action when the fog of war was thick was to freak out and flip on him, deciding that aligning yourself with his enemies was your best move. I'll leave it up to you to decide. Is that what we're talking about? So either you blindly follow him or you're on the other side. How about you're on the side of integrity and call out both sides of the paradigm? See, people like this cannot think beyond that. There's only left and right. That's the only way the world works. It's just sad. It's crazy to me. But there's so many people like this. They're doubling down to side with Trump no matter what, because the other side's bad. I hope what I'm trying to show you, or that you're seeing, that is the minority in the conversation. It always has been. The majority of people are starting to push beyond the team sport lie. Gunther Eagleman says, Stephen Miller just confirmed the White House is listening to Americans who are barely hanging on from being tortured under Biden for 4 years. Oh, is that what's happening? Not this year of complete struggle, but the 4 years before that? That's what they're still struggling through? This is just desperate, guys. And I would argue, yes, it was horrible under Biden. The point is that you're trying to just pretend like that's all that matters, that then, not what's happening now. And he's simply going, we're listening, we're going to give you some cheaper things for Thanksgiving. The desperation is palpable. Or pointing back, which we're still doing, to operatives. Hidden globalist operatives inside the Trump administration are the reason things are going wrong. Is anyone else getting tired of this fact-free claim being thrown out every time something goes awry? I certainly am. The Biden crime family, it's all coming down. Sure, arrest them. I'd love to see that. But Julie Donuts will post this every 30 seconds for the next 6 months or however long. I'd like to see some action. Most conservatives are starting to see that they're not doing anything. Nobody's getting arrested. And on that note, here is the follow-up to Kash Patel's false flag discussion. October 31st. Briefly, just where we currently are, same position, guys. No pleas, because all we have so far are criminal complaints, not actual indictments. And on top of that, what we're seeing are these two people from Dearborn, Michigan, the argument, I think, being that it's evil Muslims in Dearborn, Michigan, who simply were going to shooting ranges and were on a chat room and spoke about Pumpkin Day, as far as I can tell, again, because they haven't released damn near anything. Interestingly, the guy I was pointing to before, the unnamed 20-year-old American citizen, who, by the way, is currently not being charged with anything because he's cooperating as a witness and was detained briefly in the beginning but released without charges, and seems to be the guy that was actually the one involved with the actual ISIS overlap. So suddenly, just like with Dallas, you've got this one anomaly person who in Dallas, for example, the other two didn't even know this guy. And now he's the one that shot somebody and ran off. And they're like, you're now going to be held accountable for being involved with him. Now, again, that hasn't seemed to flesh out either. These things seem to be floated with no real follow through. What I think we're talking about is a setup, like they do every single time. It says evidence included gun ranges, park meetings to avoid detection, ISIS propaganda discussions, which means they talked about Pumpkin Day. And because you have a guy we claim is ISIS, that's ISIS discussions. So going to a gun range and then practicing high-speed reloads. You mean like literally everybody at a gun range? So basically nothing other than that you claim those things are bad when they are chatting with an ISIS guy. And it says reports of multiple suspects, up to 5 were initial. Remember that? It turned out 6, Kash Patel said, except it turns out that only 2 of them were actually charged. The rest were released. How in the world do you make sense of that? He made a huge thing about arresting the network. Remember that? Bet you I can get that real quick. Nope. Oh, there it is. I bet you that's it. There it is. An ISIS-linked Halloween plot case. Our teams dismantled multi-state ISIS network before they could strike. Right. This was on the 9th of November. They claimed they've arrested 6 people, 2 in New Jersey, 2 in Michigan, except problem is that they've only actually maintained 2 that they beginning with in Michigan. The rest was all a bunch of hype, it seems, and they released them. There's no charges. Gee, I wonder why they're not talking about that anymore. That massive thing he put out, and he says, we are doing this for you. Here's how we protect America. Well, right so far seems to be a complete false flag. But I'll wait to see more information. January 6th pipe bombing conversation. Thomas Massey is still pushing this out. Based on my questioning of witnesses reported by Steve Baker and others, and this new 11-page whistleblower disclosure, I believe management at the FBI has been covering up or has been grossly incompetent. This is posted on the 11th. And all you get is Bongino saying, we're looking at it. Kash Patel focusing on the fact that something mean was said to somebody, or like this is how this keeps going if it's even provable in the first place. She says, last night, an individual attempted to confront one of our U.S. attorneys, destroyed property at her office, then fled the scene. So knowing what they call, like knowing that they can literally have somebody brush against them and they call it a violent attack, for all we know, that's somebody who literally protested. And I mean, something very benign, they turn into some serious crime. You know, like the sandwich that was a huge deal that got dismissed from the case because it was ridiculous. That's what that ended up. The sandwich case was dismissed. Well, that's what she says. Any violence or threats against people in federal office will not be tolerated, except when you literally do that to people. I mean, the contradictions are rife. The point is that we don't even know whether this even happened when they've been caught lying tremendously. I just told you she's on the hook right now for like backdating some document to claim that it was ahead of when it needed to be there. And she's caught. That's a crime, guys, but I guarantee nothing will happen. But this is the attorney Haba says, I will not be intimidated by radical lunatics. Well, I sure as hell love to see something verified. And when it turns out to be people protesting in front of them and they make this into a big case because somebody bumped them or something benign, I'm not saying I know that. I'm saying that's what their track record has shown. Well, then you shouldn't be surprised. But Kash tags onto it and says, the FBI will lead the hunt against the 2 who threatened our brave servants. Oh, you're so powerful and brave. You're going to investigate mean words that were said. I mean, come on, guys. This is what you're focusing on? Yes. 5 Times August says, in regard to Pam Bondi saying it won't be tolerated, he said it will be tolerated because you're not going to do anything about it except post this tweet. You hold a perfect record for doing nothing about anything. It's what you do. I agree. You might have seen that Kash Patel and his FBI subpoenaed and essentially shut down archive.com for a moment, which seems to be all about the most transparency ever, right? The most transparent administration, shutting down your access to archive documents they don't want you to see. Typical. Now, I'm going to come into this more in the next, let's see, will be tomorrow to talk about, I mean, I can't say, depending on what might change by tomorrow, this may not be some of the larger, but I really keep wanting to do a focus on this. I actually still want to try to find more insight into some of these larger points. But Robert put out an excellent article entitled Israel's Anti-Muslim Hasbara Propaganda and Its Agenda to Eliminate Free Speech. It's an excellent article. It overlaps the point of how they're using this to shut down speech, but also the idea that they're trying to designate the Muslim Brotherhood a terrorist organization, whatever you think about it, in order to use that against randomly associated groups that they claim are then terrorists because they're in some way overlap with it. The same thing they've done with Palestinian groups in the past. And it's an effort to just shut down, really create anti-Muslim propaganda and shut down your ability to speak about a lot of this stuff. It's an excellent article. I'll include this. This is just Valentina Gomez. I showed you this the other day. She literally posted this saying, if something happens to me, it's the Muslims. That's how clumsy Zionists are. Like you just yell out the narrative without even giving it some tact. Like that's insanely stupid and disgusting and bigoted. But it's the Muslims. They all did it. That's a Zionist agenda for certain. Now let's see. We got about 15 minutes left. I want to finish with some health focused stuff because the real point for me is that all of this leads to a lot of different control points in our lives. One of the most obvious that I can't decouple from the technocratic drive is the fake Maha movement. Not the people that believe in Maha, but the fake government side of it, like the fake MAGAs, as opposed to the people that believe Make America Great Again. In this Trump administration, it's continuing to scream in the wrong direction. We just need to call it out. Here is RFK Jr.'s previous VP when he was actually running and saying the truth about things. Here's what she has to say about mRNA shots being forced on our cattle right now. And don't forget, guys, as I keep showing everybody, this is where it was always going. Trump leans into self-amplifying mRNA and makes it very clear that RNA in food and every other category is not stopping. But all the team sport politics people yelled and lied to everybody else. Here she is telling you it's still happening, even on Bannon's show.
We are now on the precipice of being forced to inject our cattle with the mRNA vaccine. So just like we talk about medical freedom for humans and the desire to not have mandates telling us what we have to put in our bodies, food freedom is an extension of that. We want the ability to eat meat that isn't full of these inputs. We'd also like to be fully informed. I mean, let's talk about the Nuremberg trials, right? The idea that humans have a right to be fully informed about what they're putting into their bodies. Food freedom is a really big part of that.
Yeah. I mean, the simple point is to just realize that the direction hasn't even slowed down. Right. So if we're still talking about mRNA shots, which are there, the current COVID shot is out there and deployable. The self-amplifying shots are rapidly being deployed and made by multiple companies. RNA in food, or as Thomas Massey points out, just a little reminder that the continuing resolution that they all just agreed on literally has things for edible plant vaccines. Like we were all trying to tell you, like Massey was trying to tell you. Well, now with the game of trying to distract you from something else or the shutdown battle and the immigration, well, that gets slid in. That's how that works. The real things are rarely the focal point of discussion, guys. And so I said, so apparently Ozempic, Bill Gates, fake food, transgenic edible vaccines, even COVID shots are Maha. Or is that just what the blind followers are saying, representing themselves as all of you? Speak up, conservatives. Show the nation that you are not what the team sport two-party illusion pretends that you are. One other point before we get into the THC, right? I mean, is that there's an endless amount of these examples of lying to you about the direction of where this is going. We've talked about the shots. We've talked about the food. As she was pointing out, the mRNA in cattle. I mean, aren't these all supposed to be extreme violations of what was promised? Shouldn't any one of these things be an absolute record screech? Okay, they were lying to. Well, yeah, that's kind of what's happening with most people right now. But I think what I'm worried about is that the momentum of the team, of the illusion of the majority, will be enough to keep the agenda going. So the answer to that, in my opinion, would be to get out there and scream at the top of your lungs anywhere you can to get enough attention to the reality that they don't represent everybody. Just like the government doesn't represent all of Americans, in my opinion, because they have long since sold us out. But on a health side of this, guys, it's wild to me that they're talking about, and Trump has just signed a ban on THC in Texas, in the hemp industry. This is overlapping with Tennessee. I'll probably talk about this more in the next show. But this is just old school government control stuff, guys. MAHA is aware of the benefits of the THC, rather just specifically cannabinoids, and the overlap to the health industry. I'll go into this in the next show, but this is the federal overlap, the ban that's going to threaten Tennessee's fields as well. We have the USDA now planning to drop rabies vaccines across the Southeast or Tennessee, all sorts of different places. This is new. This is as of last month. We're still doing that? I mean, this is just mind-blowing to me. It's exactly the conversation we've had. They're talking about dropping these edible rabies vaccines, something that I've talked about more than once. Edible, transmissible live rabies jabs, even though they claim that it can't spread, it definitely can. We talked about this in the show, and it definitely does spread amongst the animals. This is how they're designed. The point is that it's going to be dropped from the air over these areas in Tennessee, North Carolina, Alabama, Virginia, West Virginia, Georgia, and Maine, and New York, Ohio, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, even Massachusetts, already apparently going. The oral rabies vaccine, known as Raborol VRG, are contained within plastic sachets and coated with fish meal, so it attracts animals, including your domesticated pets. And they can eat 15 of them, and apparently that's no big deal, even though it really is, and it's super dangerous. On top of that, guys, again, we will touch on this again. I'm sure it'll come to pass. How many people had rabies in this country, do you think, over the last 2024? 4. 4 confirmed cases of humans. And yet you're dumping oral transmissible vaccines over our countries, over our states rather, which is not, we'll get into the other parts of that. That's just not safe for animals. Or only 3,834 confirmed cases in animals in all of the country. You realize how minimal that is with how many animals there are? This is not a real issue. So ask yourself, what are they doing? Well, I'll include this tweet, by the way. I'll just give it a retweet so it's out there at the top if you want to check it out, where we talk about the overlap of the GMO conversation, right? The conversation of this is obligatory pesticide spraying in New York City, GM mosquitoes, and flying vaccinators. Are they all connected? Well, it turns out that they are. And what's interesting to me, this tweet really does sum it up where it's right here. I just simply said, are you aware that GM mosquitoes were released in California and Florida are literally an experiment, are literally an experimental use permit that's been continued all the way to this very day? They're releasing these mosquitoes. Now, here's the interesting part of this. Tetracycline, to cut the chase, if you haven't seen this, tetracycline was shown to be a problem. Oxitec confidential information documents released via FOIA that they knew very early that 15% of mosquitoes actually did not die but got stronger. Now, the GM mosquitoes are supposed to be made to be able to kill off the offspring so they don't spread. It's supposed to be for your benefit, right? Well, it turns out that because the traps they were using had tetracycline, it caused them to actually be strong enough to fight it and then spread the ability to grow beyond it to other species. And so now you've got resistant GMO mosquitoes that are stronger than ever. And that's continued ever since they did this. Now, the crazy part, I found out tetracycline was the issue, right? Well, guess what? The rabies vaccines include. Guess what? The ones they're dropping all over the country include tetracycline. Yes, the edible rabies vaccines that are currently being used, and here's the list of the names. They have them right down here. It's right there. Yes, they currently include tetracycline. That was my question. Edible rabies vaccines used by the government through this program still contain tetracycline. So doesn't that begin to feel like an organized effort to literally put things out there that then cause in the environment? I mean, this is not a joke, guys. It may sound abstract to you. If you watch the show, you'll see that these things completely overlap. And what you've created is a situation where maybe by design, you've got GM mosquitoes that are possibly the, I was going to grab one, see if I can find it real quick. Well, I guess the flying vaccinators conversation is in this, right? So they've got these Bill Gates overlaps, flying vaccinators, and even for those that think that is, somehow a fake story. Can't type right now. Here's science.com. Researchers turn mosquitoes into flying vaccinators. All right. So now you've got this overlap where you've got these things are put into the field that are meant to be somehow one off, die off. They're being allowed to overlap with this other problem, which is causing all sorts of environmental issues, hurting domesticated animals, killing off other species. And then they spray on top of all of that. And guess what the obligatory spraying that they spray out of the back of the trucks in your streets do? The same exact thing. So all together, you've got this weird trifecta of a problem that nobody connects with each other. And they really do lead to the growth of the issue. Now, whether they're putting out more vaccinators, whether it's about, like Catherine's point to the great poisoning, you can decide what you think that leads to, what the objective is. Just recognize whatever the intention, this is bad for you. And what they're doing as they still dump these things across our states, whether the individual dropping it even knows, these things are hurting your environment. They're hurting your animals. They're actually doing the opposite of what they claim they're doing. So I will end with a couple of clips here to how this overlaps with the technocratic control structure that all of this will lead to. And we'll be seeing you in the next show. Thank you all for being here tonight. And I'll be interviewing with Ricky on the ripple effect. I don't know if it's on tonight. If it is, I'll see you there. I love you all. As always, question everything. Come to your own conclusions. Oh, wait. I'm going to play one clip on the way out, and I will show you these two. Catherine Austin Fitts talking about the control grid. She also points out, here is how the administration is promoting programmable money and the digital control grid. Fans out there hawking the control CBDC grid. David Icke, the cult has no borders. It's one gigantic interconnected club, and you ain't in it. Bachelor showing Alex Karp. Palantir CEO says that a surveillance state is in the U.S. would be better than letting China win the AI race. Great. That's what he keeps saying. China can't win AI, so let us control your lives. It'll all work out. Well, you're smarter than that. Thank you for tuning in, guys. I'll see you next time.
I think they put Trump in to get the control grid. And we have at Solari, we have a collection that we update every week of all the things the administration is doing to build the control grid. And I have to tell you, if I had chosen Trump to get the control grid, and I was going to grade him on his performance to date, he gets an A+++. He's done a fabulous job. And I can't imagine another politician who could have done this much this fast. So, but if you look at what they've achieved, I don't think they need Trump anymore. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to get rid of him, but if they want to get rid of him with Epstein, they can. It will work.
Yeah,
I just
I'm so surprised that, to me, it's quite obvious that Trump is on the list because they were besties. But if he's on the list, and he knows, of course, he would be on the list, why was he making Epstein so important during his campaign? Because, of course, that would backfire at some point. It doesn't seem logical for Trump to use Epstein as a trump card in the campaign.
So I don't know if he was using it a lot in the campaign. I think Kash Patel was using it a lot, and I think Dan Bongino was using it a lot.
Well, at least his team was using it, right? So, and also all his supporters were vocal about it, and he could have stopped it back then already. And now it's too late to get the genie back in the bottle.
So here's who pushed it, and I didn't realize this until recently, because I was very early on in saying QAnon was a hoax porn and ridiculous and not to pay any attention to it. But what I didn't understand was QAnon made a very big deal about Epstein and pedophilia and Trump secretly cleaning it all up. And, basically the Democrats were engaged in pedophilia and they were at the heart of Epstein, and Trump was going to secretly clean it all up. So QAnon apparently made a huge deal about Epstein. And, that is seriously, in my opinion, and I say this because I know many people trapped in it, it's a cult. It's just a completely adult fairy tale, but they believed it. And so now that he's coming out and saying, oh, it was a hoax, Epstein is a hoax, it flies completely in the face of the cult. So now we've got a really big problem. And I don't know why he didn't put it back in the box. I don't know why.
Yeah, and it's too late now, I think, especially since Musk is saying he's on the list. To me, it all seems like a trick to, in the end, get rid of Trump and then continue with Vance, who is already part of the Palantir and Peter Thiel gang anyway.
If the people who run the system want Trump out, they can use Epstein to do it. It will work.